Muito bom dia, meus amigos. Hoje, 9 de fevereiro de 2024, pelo horário de Brasília. Agora são 9 horas 21 minutos. Estamos iniciando mais uma transmissão em nosso canal UPTV. Hoje, então, aí com a missão Axioma AX3, né? Fazendo, então, aí o encerramento aí desta missão, né? Que teve início, então, no dia 18 de janeiro, né? Com o lançamento, então, aí da Dragon Freedom, com a missão tripulada da empresa Axioma, pela missão AXIOM-3, né, que teve então o lançamento no dia 18 de janeiro, né, e o undocking, né, a liberação então na Estação Espacial Internacional, ocorreu então no dia 7 de fevereiro, né, na saída então da Estação Espacial Internacional, e hoje, né, aí quase 20 dias no espaço, né, então eles retornam aí à Terra, né, a tripulação então aí composta pela toda ela europeia, né, aí com essa tripulação aí pela tripulação então aí do Michael López-Alegría, né, o nosso comandante, né, que ele é da Espanha e também dos Estados Unidos, Walter Villadei, da Itália, que é o piloto, Alper Gezeravcı, da Turquia, é nosso primeiro especialista da missão, e Marcos Wandt, da Suécia, nosso segundo especialista da missão. Então, lembrando, né, que hoje também teremos aí a nova tentativa de lançamento para a missão Starlink, com início da transmissão a partir das 21 horas e 25 minutos aqui no nosso canal. Então, fiquem ligados, né, que daqui a pouquinho, assim que a gente terminar aqui esta transmissão de hoje, né, eu vou colocar então aí lá o link, né, para a gente acompanhar então aí a transmissão então da missão Starlink. Estamos aguardando então o início de contato aqui com a Spacex, né, com a empresa então Axiom, né, com a missão em conjunto então Spacex e Axioma. Lembrando também que no dia 22 de fevereiro, né, tá programado então aí para acontecer a ida então da nova tripulação para a Estação Espacial Internacional, a Crew 8, né? Nós vamos acompanhar então também o lançamento desta missão tripulada, né, para a Estação Espacial Internacional. Também este mês já estamos então iniciando nossa transmissão em conjunto com a SpaceX. Vamos acompanhar. Este mês também teremos aí a missão de carga da Rússia Progress MS-26 também aí esse mês, hein? E no dia 14 teremos aí duas missões, né? Uma com a SpaceX e a outra lá do Japão aí com o segundo teste de voo do veículo H3. Então do Splashdown, né, que é o famoso toque na água, então está previsto aí para acontecer por volta das 10h30 da manhã, dentro de uma hora praticamente, né? Daqui a dentro de uma hora, né? O Splashdown. Estamos iniciando nossa transmissão em conjunto, então, aí com SpaceX e Axiom. Quatro astronautas, 5 países: Turquia, Espanha, Estados Unidos, Itália, Suécia. Juntos, então, aí nesta missão tripulada AXIOM-3. Então aí a tripulação: Michael López-Alegría, Walter Villadei, Alper Gezeravcı, Marcos Wandt.
And welcome to SpaceX and Axiom Space's Splashdown coverage of AX-3, the third crewed mission to the International
Estamos
Space
então ao
Station by
vivo com a
Axiom
nossa
Space.
transmissão em
I'm
conjunto
Jesse
com a
Anderson, a
SpaceX
Manufacturing
e a
Engineering Manager
AXIOM.
here at SpaceX
Então
headquarters
acompanhando
in Hawthorne,
esta
California.
missão de retorno então aí na com o Splashdown, né, a reentrada em
Over 21 days
Splashdown.
in space, our crew spent just over 18 days aboard the International Space Station. And while on
Lembrando que
board, they
eles
experienced more than
ficaram
288 orbits and
a
covered
bordo
over
então da Estação
7.6
Espacial
million
Internacional
miles.
por 18
Now we are in
dias.
the final
Estamos aí com
phase of
imagens
their
ao
journey.
vivo,
Over the next hour,
aí
we will
dentro
follow
da
the
Dragon
return of
Freedom,
Commander
aí
López-Alegría, Walter Villadei,
dentro da nave
Alper
então
e
aí
Gezeravcı,
com a
and
tripulação já
Marcus
se
Wandt, as they
preparando
splash down off the coast
para
of
a
Florida and
liberação
bring the
então aí
operational phases of the AX-3
da
mission
parte do
to a close.
compartimento de carga da Dragon.
Over the last 40 hours, Dragon has been moving into position for re-entry with downhill phasing burns, firings of Dragon's Draco thrusters to adjust the spacecraft's orbit in advance of returning to Earth. The next action coming up for Dragon will be to jettison the trunk, which is the cylindrical, unpressurized part of the spacecraft. Once the trunk is separated, Dragon will be running entirely on battery power. The trunk is currently connected to the aft or the bottom section of the Dragon
Estamos nos
capsule where the
preparando
heat
para a
shield is
etapa então da
located.
liberação da
From there, the
parte de
spacecraft
trás da
will use its
Dragon.
forward Draco thrusters to perform a
Aí a
deorbit
parte
burn, which will
do
last
como se
about
fosse
9
então
minutes
o
and put
compartimento de
Dragon on a
carga.
trajectory to return to
Então aí
Earth.
da Dragon
This will be
Freedom,
the last time that we use those
onde fica
forward
então a parte de
bulkhead
bateria, né,
thrusters.
pressurização e também aí a
After that, we will
parte
close and lock the
onde
nose
fica
cone in
armazenado
preparation
então
for re-entry.
os
During
painéis
re-entry,
solares,
as
né?
Dragon passes back into the Earth's atmosphere, we will have an expected loss of communication, sometimes referred to as an LOS, or loss of signal. This
E aí ela
particular
está falando
LOS is
que
caused by the friction of
durante
the
então a
spacecraft
reentrada,
pushing
né,
through the
aí
air at a
temos aí
high
uma
rate
perda
of
de
speed,
comunicação,
to the
de
point
sinal,
that builds
né,
up a layer of
esperada,
super hot
aí mais
plasma
ou
around
menos
the
aí em
vehicle.
torno de 6 a
This
7
plasma will
minutos
dissipate and the communications will resume once
de
the
perda de
vehicle slows
comunicação
down.
devido
This
aí o
LOS
momento
should
então
last
da
approximately
reentrada
7
por conta
minutes.
das altas
Throughout
temperaturas,
this
né?
time, nitrox is
Aí
used to
do
cool the cabin and the suits to keep the crew
nesse momento então
comfortable.
de reentrada aí
Nitrox is a mixed breathable
na
gas that
atmosfera.
is also used in scuba diving. After we regain communication with Dragon, we'll have a
9
couple
horas
minutes before the
28
drone parachutes
minutos
deploy.
pelo horário de
These are the
Brasília,
two
né?
smaller
Então quem está
parachutes
chegando
that are
agora,
designed
estamos
to
aí com
stabilize
imagens
Dragon and begin to
ao
slow it
vivo, então
down.
aí da
Less than a
tripulação
minute
da
after
Dragon
the drone
Freedom,
parachutes deploy, we'll
aí
see
pela missão
release of the
AXIOM
four main
AX3.
parachutes. These are the big
Estamos
orange
então
and
nos
white
preparando aí
parachutes
para o
that further
momento
slow the vehicle down.
da liberação
Over the course of 3
do
minutes, the
compartimento de
drogues and
carga,
mains
aí
work
da
together to
cápsula
bring the
Dragon.
vehicle's velocity from 350 miles per hour down to just 15
Lembrando
miles
que a
per
Dragon
hour,
então ela
at
tem
which point Dragon will splash back
a
down
nave
on
Dragon,
Earth.
né? Então aí tem aí
And when it does,
duas partes,
SpaceX
né? Que é
knows
essa parte
exactly where
de trás,
Dragon
né?
is
Que é o
expected to
compartimento de
land, with
carga
recovery teams
e
pre-positioned in the
a
area.
cápsula onde
These
fica
teams are
então a
trying to quickly make
tripulação
contact with the Dragon
da,
spacecraft, secure it,
da
and
Spacex,
then hoist it
né? No caso,
aboard the
AXIOM-3.
main recovery vessel. From there, teams will open the hatch and help Commander MLA.
5 minutes. SpaceX Dragon, we copy.
Então aí após 40 horas, aí viajando ao redor da Terra em
And from there,
órbita,
teams will open the hatch
aí
and
eles
help
estão
Commander MLA, Walter, Alper,
aí
and Marcus
se
out of
preparando
Dragon Freedom.
para então aí o
Well,
momento
the
da
AX-3 mission has been
liberação
remarkable from start to finish in a number of ways, and each of these
da
missions
parte de trás
iterate
então
on
da
the
Dragon.
process of flying to and living on station. Each of these missions, each crew, help open that door to low Earth orbit just a little bit further. And this crew has certainly done just that, as they stayed very busy while on station.
Yes, they have. So
9
let's take
horas
a
e
moment
30
and
minutos pelo
properly
horário
introduce
de
the crew.
Brasília.
The commander of our
Então que
mission,
Splashdown,
Michael López-Alegría,
então aí está
or
previsto
MLA, is no
aí
stranger
para
to human
acontecer por
spaceflight.
volta das
He is a dual
10h30
citizen of the United
da
States
manhã na
and
costa
Spain.
da Flórida, no
AX-3 marks his
Oceano Atlântico,
sixth
nos
mission to
Estados
space,
Unidos.
having completed 3 space shuttle flights and a Soyuz mission as a NASA astronaut prior to commanding AX-1 with Axiom Space. MLA holds the NASA record for both the total number of spacewalks and the cumulative amount of time conducting spacewalks. Today, when not in low Earth orbit, MLA serves as Axiom Space's chief astronaut.
And from Italy, our pilot is Colonel Walter Villadei. This mission is his inaugural trip to low Earth orbit. Villadei, a colonel in the Italian Air Force, currently serves as head of the Italian Air Force's representative office in the United States. He has completed cosmonaut training as a space engineer, participated in multiple analog training missions, and flown a variety of aircraft and missions as an active flight engineer in the Italian Air Force. This mission is significant for Italy in that it commemorates the 100th year since the founding of the Italian Air Force.
From Turkey, our third crew member is mission specialist Alper Gezeravcı. Through this mission, Alper has become the first Turkish astronaut to go to space. With 15 years of experience across a myriad of aircraft for the Turkish Air Force, Gezeravcı got his start in the Air Force Academy in Istanbul, Turkey, and earned a master's degree from the U.S. Air Force Institute of Technology. He then flew as a commercial airline captain for several years before returning to duty in the Turkish Air Force. On a further note, this mission marks the 100th anniversary of the founding of the Republic of Turkey.
And finally, from Sweden, we have mission specialist Marcus Wandt. A lieutenant colonel in the Swedish Air Force, Marcus flew 9 years as a fighter pilot and graduated from the U.S. Navy Test Pilot School at the top of his class. In November of 2022, Marcus was selected by the European Space Agency as an astronaut reserve. However, with the AX-3 mission, he becomes the first project astronaut in ESA's history, a new designation within their ranks. And through this mission, he becomes only the second ESA astronaut of Swedish nationality to ever go to the International Space Station, a milestone marked in a year of Jubilee as the 500th anniversary of the founding of the country of Sweden.
What an incredible crew. They have been well prepared and trained and have such an array and years of experience.
Yeah, they really do, Jesse. You know, this is the first all-European commercial mission to the ISS, and these four men
Bom dia,
proudly
meus
represent the
amigos.
five
Bom dia,
nations
João. Bom dia,
that
Marcos.
they
Sejam
represent.
bem-vindos,
And
então, aí
you
a
know, their
nossa
training has really brought them
transmissão
from
de
launch
hoje.
to life on orbit, and now into their
É
journey
9
back
horas
home.
33 minutos pelo horário de
At the
Brasília.
moment, Dragon is doing a couple of things autonomously. It is an
Estamos
autonomous
então aí
vehicle.
acompanhando
It's
neste momento
isolating the
o
thermal
procedimento
control
iniciando,
system
o
fluid
procedimento
loops
então
from
de
the
retorno
radiator.
e
This system as
logo
well
mais
will
então
help keep the
Splashdown
internal temperature of
aí na
Dragon
costa da
temperate
Flórida,
for our crew
no
during
Oceano
re-entry.
Atlântico, aí
Next
pela
up, we
missão
are waiting
tripulada
for the claw to
privada
separate. The claw
AXIOM,
connects
né,
the trunk to the
AX-3.
capsule, delivers power, telemetry, and fluids. And
Dragon
claw
Freedom
separation is the first step
da
in trunk
Spacex.
separation.
Estamos aguardando o momento então da separação do
We
compartimento
are just about 3 minutes
carga.
or so away from claw separation.
da parte do compartimento de carga aí da Dragon. Para só ficar então a parte da
And what you're seeing there on
da
your
cápsula.
screen is a view of mission control here in Hawthorne, California. And again, in just a few minutes, we will have claw separation, which will be shortly followed by
Lembrando que
trunk
logo mais, então, a
separation
partir
just about
das
a minute afterwards. And then a few
21h25,
minutes
teremos a
after
nova
trunk separation,
tentativa
we will
para o
begin a
lançamento
deorbit
da
burn that
missão
will help
Starlink
bring the
138
Dragon,
do grupo
into
713.
an orbit that takes it down, ready
E hoje
for
também
the
tivemos
landing
aí
zone.
o lançamento da Rússia pela missão
Yes, and while we're
Cosmos
waiting for that, on your right of the screen, you
22575.
see Mission Control
Então, assim que
Center
terminarmos essa
Houston,
transmissão,
Texas. That is AXIOM's
aí eu
Mission Control
colocarei
Center, also
também
known as
o vídeo do
MCCA.
lançamento aí da
And from
Rússia
MCCA,
aí para
teams
vocês.
have been monitoring and supporting this mission.
Deorbit sequence start.
Então, nesse momento, estamos iniciando a sequência de descida de órbita.
Copy.
Sequência, então, de descida de
That's
órbita
great,
sendo
just the kind of
iniciada
call these crews are
neste
waiting to hear, and
momento.
these support teams are waiting to hear from Mission Control.
Yeah, that call out just confirms that they are going to begin the deorbit sequence, and claw separation again is coming up here in just a couple of minutes. And about a minute after claw separation, we will also have trunk separation. That is the unpressurized section of the vehicle that will jettison from the Dragon capsule and expose the heat shield that will be used
E
as the
também lembrando que no
vehicle
dia
and crew
22 de
re-enter into the
fevereiro
Earth's
teremos aí a
atmosphere.
nova missão tripulada aí da SpaceX, né, a Crew 8, né, pela estação. Indo então em direção à Estação Espacial Internacional, substituirá a Crew 7.
And again, on your right, you see views of
E também vamos ter também
MCCA, AXIOM's
semana,
Mission Control Center
por
in
esta
Houston,
semana que
Texas.
vem aí
And really, this is kind of
a
a hub of
missão
our
de carga
operations for supporting the AX
da,
missions. So
da
AX-3,
Rússia, né, Progress
throughout the course of their time from
MS-26.
launch into orbit on ISS and now coming back home has been supported 24/7 by this team of flight controllers. They support things from payload and stowage operations to payload support and integration, and just helping crew maintain and schedule their day.
Yeah, it's awesome to see both teams working in tandem.
Para quem está chegando neste momento, nós estamos aí acompanhando o momento então da descida de órbita, que já foi iniciada
Should be
aí
coming up
pela
on claw
Dragon.
separation here
Neste
pretty
momento, então,
shortly, so
estamos
just waiting
acompanhando
for
este
that
momento
call out.
aí. Os preparativos para a reentrada na atmosfera. Lembrando que o Splashdown, né, então, está previsto para acontecer às 10h30 da manhã. Né, então, quem ainda não se inscreveu no canal, se
Again, if you're
inscreva.
just joining us,
Deixa o
we are
like
expecting claw
na
separation here
transmissão.
any moment now, and just waiting for the call out. Once we do have claw separation, about a minute later,
Estamos aí
we
nos
will be
aproximando,
able
então,
to
2.200
jettison the trunk
inscritos
from
no
the
canal.
Dragon capsule.
9h37 pelo horário de Brasília. No dia 14 de fevereiro, então, teremos aí novo teste de voo para o veículo H3.
Nominal trunk jettison.
Tudo em ordem.
Copy.
Até o momento tudo segue em ordem. De acordo
And
com...
great news, we did hear a call out confirming trunk separation. That means that we
Então,
also had claw
confirmando então a
separation,
separação da
which
da
prepares
parte então
for
de
that
carga
trunk jettison.
aí
So
da
that means
Dragon.
that telemetry is looking good. The nitrox
Nós
system
estamos
is
então aí
primed
às
for cabin and
9h38
suit
pelo
cooling,
horário de
and the heat
Brasília.
shield
Estamos
is
aí então
exposed and
confirmando
ready for atmospheric
neste momento
reentry.
então a
Up
liberação
next
da
is
parte de
the
carga
de-orbit burn.
da
This
nave
is the
Dragon
last
Freedom.
time that the forward Dracos, which are the 4 thrusters located on the top of the vehicle, will ignite. The de-orbit burn will place Dragon
Próxima
on a
etapa então aí
precise
será então o
trajectory
momento
to
de
return
queima
to the
aí
splashdown
do
zone
motor
off the
para
coast
a
of
descida
Daytona,
de
Florida,
órbita.
and will last approximately 9 minutes.
Estamos aguardando então o
Yes, and
momento
while we're waiting for those calls, it's really kind of starting the dynamic phase
da
of what we're
autorização
looking
então
at
da
for this
queima aí
return
do
trip home. It's a very
motor aí da
active day.
cápsula Dragon.
We saw both mission control
Para
centers
então
here
aí
in Hawthorne and
iniciarmos
then also in
a
Houston,
parte de descida de
really
órbita de
working
fato.
towards all of that
Né, a
effort to bring them
sequência de
home. So
descida de
it's
órbita, né, se
starting this
inicia
dynamic operations,
aí
it's
com a
working through the
liberação então
procedures
da
today.
parte de trás
They're ready for this type of
da
operation.
Dragon,
And
né,
really,
a parte
we're
de
getting into a lot of
carga,
excitement here today.
onde fica
Yeah,
o
and you
painel
say
solar.
dynamic. There's a lot of things that
E
are going to
aí
happen
então
very quickly.
teremos aí
Each
então
one of these milestones are only a few minutes apart.
continuando a sequência de
Aside
descida
from the
de órbita,
de-orbit
então aí
burn,
a
which will
queima
last about 9 minutes,
aí
but
do
it's
motor
like
da
it's
cápsula da
event
Dragon,
after event.
né, para
So
então
pretty
aí
exciting
fazer
for the
esta
crew.
descida
I'm
de
sure they're
órbita.
very excited to come home. They've been in space for about 21 days
Yeah,
now.
23 flight days too. Yeah.
I'm sure they will not miss the space views, but they're probably very, very excited to splash down back on Earth.
I think they are, yeah. And, we were talking about waiting for those calls today, it being very dynamic. Really, a lot of these dynamic phases are started by each of those calls, and the crews on
E aí
the
lembrando que
ground,
durante então a
supporting
reentrada,
off the
né,
coast of
teremos aí uma
Florida
perda de
are all waiting for
comunicação
those calls to hear, so they know
já
that we're on
esperada em
track
torno
for
aí
the
de
right
6
operations
a
that are coming
7
next.
minutos.
Exactly. And again, if you're just now joining us, we are just waiting for the de-orbit burn to begin. That should be coming in just about a couple minutes. It will last about 9 minutes and will help reorient the Dragon capsule on a trajectory that will line it up in preparation for its landing. And splashdown is, just under a couple hours away from now.
Yeah, we're looking forward to a good morning of activity as we press towards crew coming down, splashing down, and then at that point we're really ready to greet our crew home, and learn about their mission, learn more about their mission, and just really have them back on Earth. We're looking forward to it.
Yeah, so let's talk a little bit about Dragon. It's about
Aí nosso
27 feet
infográfico aí
tall.
na
And
Dragon,
you can see
né?
on your screen
Tô
that the
lembrando
top
que
portion
essa
is the
parte então aí de
capsule
trás que a gente
portion
está
of
vendo
the
aí, né,
vehicle, and the bottom portion
da
is
Dragon,
the trunk section.
aí já foi
That trunk
liberado.
section is the unpressurized portion of the
E agora só tá
vehicle,
apenas
which
então
we
a
did
parte
just
da
jettison a few
cápsula, né, ou
moments
vaso,
ago.
né, como
We
eles
no
chamam.
longer need the trunk there. You can see that the black portion of it, that is the solar arrays that provides power to the vehicle. But now that the vehicle is coming home, we are exposing or have exposed the heat shield, which is on the bottom of that capsule, and that helps protect the vehicle and the crew as it's re-entering back into the Earth's atmosphere. So very exciting, very awesome vehicle, keeping the crew safe and cool. Now that the trunk is separated, it's on its own internal battery power, so it is keeping the crew cool, even though there's nothing connected to it. That's what the solar arrays are there for. It's charged up those batteries, so now it has enough
9
power
horas
to bring
41
the
minutos.
vehicle
Até o
and the
momento
crew back
tudo
home.
segue em
Right, and
ordem.
that, that trunk for the.
Aí, portanto, a tripulação
Oh yeah, and there, actually speaking
da
of Dragon, we can see crew
AXIOM-3
comfortable
na
in
tela.
that live view on Dragon.
Yeah, this is always a great view, seeing the crew inside of the capsule live as they are making their
Então,
journey
estamos
back
vendo aí
home
o
to Earth.
nosso piloto, o Walter Villadei.
And again, this is an autonomous vehicle, so really they get to enjoy the ride. They do have
Fazendo
those
então o
display
procedimento aí
panels
de descida de
right in
órbita.
front of them, so that they can monitor, everything that's going on, each event that's happening. They're able to see and monitor those events there on that screen there that you're seeing.
Right.
But it is an autonomous vehicle, so most of this journey, I hope that they are relaxing a little bit.
And I think they are, Jesse. I think they're excited to get home, but you can see there, front and center, right? Commander López-Alegría and pilot Walter Villadei, they have pretty critical roles still to play on their trip home. But like you said, being an autonomous vehicle, really, they are there to help ensure that the vehicle is doing what it needs to do on its way home. It's a great view there over their shoulders of the displays that they're looking at to monitor their progress home and make those call downs to ground like we talked about, to ensure that we're in the right phases of dynamic operations and help ground crews synchronize on where they're at in their day on Dragon.
Yeah, and we do expect that the deorbit burn has approximately started, or should be starting here soon. We're just waiting for a call out there. Again, the deorbit burn will last about 9 minutes long. And just some really cool views of the crew.
Speaking of the views we see there, Jesse, one thing I'm really happy to see is the number of patches that are on the inside of the Dragon. I think it's one of my favorite things that patches are a huge aspect of spaceflight. They signify what the mission was about, the crew that was involved, all of the significance of what that mission represented, and seeing AX-3 there now added to this Dragon capsule is pretty fantastic. It'll stay there. Being a reusable vehicle, it's going to keep staying there.
Yeah, I love that they have started this tradition, so every crew
Estamos
that gets
acompanhando
to
os
fly in one of
procedimentos
these
então aí de descida
Dragon
de órbita
capsules, they put the patch inside
da,
there, and it's just like
da
a really
Dragon
cool
Freedom.
thing to see as the
Estamos
number of
então aí
patches
já
begin to
em
increase.
progresso.
This is Dragon Freedom, and it has been reused a few times now. And we are in the middle of that deorbit burn that we have been mentioning. It is approximately 9 minutes long. And within the last 10 minutes, we've been able to jettison.
Então, lembrando que esse procedimento então, de descida de órbita leva em torno de 9 a 10 minutos.
Once it's time for our crew to splash down back on Earth, they'll be heading to one of 7 targeted sites supported by SpaceX. All of these sites are located off the coast of Florida, either in the Gulf of Mexico or the Atlantic Ocean. Spreading the supported sites across multiple locations helps to maximize the return opportunities for this mission in future crews, lowering the chance that we'll have to wave off due to bad weather. Since Dragon is capable of splashdown on either side of the Florida Panhandle, we have 2 identical and fully equipped recovery vessels ready to support, one in the Gulf of Mexico, which is Megan, and the other in the Atlantic Ocean, which is Shannon.
Yes, and taking into account many different variables, including what landing sites have favorable weather, SpaceX teams have selected a primary landing site off the coast of Daytona, Florida, in the Atlantic for today's return. There are a number of weather-related items that play into splashdown and recovery operations. Some of the more obvious factors that impact operations are rain or chance of lightning in the recovery zone, both for the safety of crew inside the capsule and the recovery teams on the water. But we're also looking for wind speeds to be less than 15 feet per second, or about 10 miles per hour, and relatively calm seas, so that we can safely execute recovery operations which includes landing a helicopter on the recovery ship to fly our crew back
Então,
to
para quem
shore.
está chegando agora neste momento,
As you
estamos
can see,
acompanhando o
there are a
momento então
number
de
of
descida de
variables and
órbita
criteria that come into play,
da
and
nave
they all help
Dragon
ensure
Freedom,
safety for
aí
both the
direção
crew
então à
and the recovery teams.
fase então de
But the weather
reentrada
conditions today
na
are
atmosfera da
looking
Terra logo
great
logo
for
dentro de
Splashdown.
instantes, né?
For
Lembrando
these
que este
operations,
procedimento então leva
SpaceX
então
closely
aí
coordinates with the United
entre
States Coast
9
Guard
a
to
10
establish a
minutos.
safety zone to ensure public safety and for the safety of
Estamos
those
aguardando então a
involved in the recovery
confirmação dentro de
operations,
instantes
as well as the crew on
aí
board the
da
returning
deste
spacecraft.
término então aí do
Multiple notices
procedimento
are
de
issued
descida
to
de
the
órbita.
mariners in advance, and
Lembrando que o
during
Splashdown
recovery
então está
operations,
previsto
and
para
Coast
acontecer
Guard
às 10
patrol
horas
boats
e
are
30
deployed to
minutos no
discourage
horário de
boaters from
Brasília,
entering the splashdown
aí no
zones.
Oceano
That's
Atlântico
right.
na
And we want
costa
to
da
stress to the
Flórida.
public the need to respect the safety zone. Recovering a spacecraft from the water is a very hazardous operation, and any other boats interfering in the area not only increases the risk to the astronauts in the capsule and the teams working to recover them from the water, but also to themselves as well. So for the safety of the crew, as well as your own safety, we recommend you sit back and watch the teams who have trained extensively for this moment do what they need to do.
And speaking of training, as you might imagine, astronaut training can be extensive. From training that is specific to each crew member's role to learning SpaceX protocols, ISS systems, and preparing for the science and outreach activities they conduct in space, private astronaut training is rigorous. For SpaceX-related efforts alone, the AX-3 crew spent about 35 days altogether training inside of Dragon. As we continue to await word on the deorbit burn, let's share some of the range of these efforts with you now. To prepare them for flight, our teams at SpaceX spent the last several months teaching the crew about orbital mechanics and how to live in microgravity. We also used our Dragon training capsules to run simulations of ascent, ISS rendezvous, and re-entry. The training program includes nearly 100 different lessons covering all aspects of the flight. The team also spent time at the launch pad in our suit-up room and working through emergency procedures that would be necessary in the unlikely event of a pad abort scenario.
And beyond these efforts to get to and from station, this crew also spent months training for their time on orbit. So the crew spent an extensive amount of time in historic Building 9 at the Johnson Space Center, learning from certified instructors on all critical systems necessary to ensure a successful stay aboard the orbiting laboratory. The team even prepared for unlikely emergencies and learned how to provide first aid in a
Estamos vendo então um
microgravity
vídeo aí
environment.
do
Additionally, they learned how
treinamento,
to
né,
prepare
que eles
food and make
fazem
selections in their meals,
ao longo
as well as
então aí
learning
de
how
alguns
mission
meses,
control
né,
operates to better
preparação
ensure
então aí
mission
para
success during their flight.
a missão,
They also had a chance to
né, que eles
familiarize themselves with
se
the gear
realizam,
that
né, na
will enable
Estação
them to
Espacial
document their trip, their
Internacional.
research, and help them connect with those back here on Earth
Então eles
during
têm
their
aí toda
outreach
a
events.
fase então de preparação da
And ESA and JAXA
da
also
nave
played a critical
Dragon,
role in cruise training.
né, e
Each
também aí
module
a
has its own
parte da
nuances, so gaining insight into the
simulação então
specialties of
também
their
da Estação
racks
Espacial
and modules
Internacional,
is necessary, especially for this mission. Extensive training on station navigation,
com
on-orbit familiarization,
simuladores.
emergency response, and just repetition of walking through these processes and procedures helps the crew maximize every second they have
tanto da
during their flight, which they
parte
did.
então de treinamento também
Simulating
aí
science
de
research, operations, and
caso
even
se
discussing how
houver
to sleep in space are all
emergência.
necessary lessons on the path to readiness. And now, you can't truly experience flying space until you fly into space, but some really unique tools have been developed to provide the closest experience possible. An altitude chamber can challenge the body with oxygen deprivation in a controlled and
Estamos
safe
vendo então
manner.
aí os
And
vídeos de
human-sized
treinamento
centrifuges send the crew members for a spin
aí da
to simulate the
tripulação
G-forces that will be
AXIOM-3.
experienced by the body during launch and re-entry, like today. It can be a nauseating experience, but it does help the crew know what to expect to be as prepared as possible for what this day holds. And for AX-3, the Italian Air Force, the Turkish Space Agency, and ESA each had their own specific mission objectives for their respective crew members. And together, we made sure that they were ready to meet these goals.
Yeah, I think it is pretty amazing all the work that these crew members put into training for launch, for time on the International Space Station, as well as returning back home. And I think people forget that you're not just training for, you know, the dynamic events of launch. You're also training for, you know, the science that they're doing on the mission, and for the AX-3 crew, you know, the outreach events that they're also doing throughout their mission. So it's not just, you know, one portion of the training. They have to train on so many different things.
You're right. They're training for, like what you see here, right? They're training for capsule operations, for vehicle operations. They're training for their launch day, their landing day. They're training for their life on orbit. What I love about it, though, too, is it's a whole network of training. It's not just crew. It's also all those ground teams that we saw that staff those control centers. Each one of those flight controllers goes through a certification process. They train for this moment and for this mission as well. And together, that whole team and network knows exactly what to do throughout the mission. They're trained for nominal and off-nominal events. And it's an entire journey for both crew and ground teams to really successfully accomplish this mission. And AX-3 is a great example of that. They succeeded in accomplishing all of their mission objectives. And this is a great culmination to that effort.
Yeah, you make a great point. There are 4
Então,
crew
como
members
vocês podem
on
observar
Dragon,
ali no
but
mapa
they
do
brought
meio, né?
a lot of people
Aí a
with them from
trajetória
AXIOM Space, from
Dragon
SpaceX.
SpaceX, deorbit burn complete,
Dragon.
performance nominal, nose cone closure is initiated.
Então, nesse momento, estamos iniciando o fechamento do nariz da Dragon. A descida de órbita aí foi concluída
Copy all, SpaceX.
com sucesso e agora estamos aí iniciando o procedimento então, do fechamento do nariz da Dragon. Estamos então nos preparando para o momento da reentrada, hein? Estamos na fase dos preparativos aí para a reentrada.
And we just heard that call out that the deorbit burn is complete. In the background, Dragon is currently inhibiting those forward bulkhead Draco thrusters that we just used to complete the deorbit burn, ensuring it's safe to latch the nose cone shut for re-entry. Also, the vehicle has initiated the nitrox suit purge. This will help keep the crew cool and comfortable during re-entry, which is coming up in just a few minutes. At this point, the nose cone is closing and protecting the forward hatch for re-entry. The crew is using their screens to monitor the locking of the nose cone, which is done by a set of hooks. And the crew, again, as we mentioned, they use those displays to monitor what's going on, but the vehicle is fully autonomous. Again, they don't really need to do anything or control anything. The vehicle is flying itself and completed those deorbit burns by itself, and now the nose cone is
9 horas e 53 minutos pelo horário de Brasília. Estamos então neste momento acompanhando o momento do fechamento do nariz da Dragon. E nos preparando então aí para o momento da reentrada logo depois.
Right, and you know, the nose cone really is another great example of that dynamic operation, a certain call out that we're waiting for to know that the vehicle is on a good path on its timeline to get back home. And at this point, you know, we really are waiting for a bit more of those dynamic calls, all those teams on the ground that are expecting those calls, to kind of know where we're at in our timeline so that we are ready and positioned on the ground to retrieve crew.
Yeah, exactly. And in the next about 20 minutes, we will have that expected loss of signal or that loss of communication that we mentioned earlier. That will be about a 7-minute period while the vehicle is performing atmospheric re-entry. Again, this is normal. This is the plasma building up around the Dragon capsule. The vehicle actually, the plasma around the vehicle gets to about 3,500 degrees Fahrenheit. So it's really, really hot. Yeah. And as we mentioned, that the Dragon capsule is now beginning to flow that nitrox into the cabin and into their suits. That is to help keep them cool throughout that very hot period of time that's coming up in about 20 minutes or so.
Right, you know, and Jesse, you keyed on a certain thing there that I think is really important to remember too. It's a nominal part of today's process, right? But it's a very critical aspect of it, a very important part. But like we
Então,
talked
nesse
about
momento agora é só esperar até o momento então da reentrada iniciar. Lembrando que o Splashdown então está previsto para acontecer no horário então, de Brasília, 10 horas e 30 minutos, no horário internacional, 13 horas e 50 minutos, e 30 minutos. Estamos então acompanhando o momento aí, progresso já, né? A parte então, do fechamento do nariz da Dragon. Lembrando então que a fase então, de descida de órbita já foi concluída. E agora então neste momento o nariz da Dragon está sendo fechada e para então iniciar o procedimento aí da reentrada.
And we've confirmed that the deorbit burn has completed. and the nose cone has also officially closed. So as we begin the second half of entry,
Lembrando que ela falou então que agora já oficialmente o nariz da Dragon já está então fechada. Então oficialmente aí o nariz da Dragon aí já está então oficialmente fechada, e então dentro de instantes aí então teremos aí o procedimento de reentrada, e aí ficaremos com perda de comunicação aí com a Dragon em torno aí de 6 a 7 minutos por conta de altas temperaturas aí do plasma, né, no momento então da reentrada com a atmosfera da Terra.
With our solar system. SpaceX partnered with NASA to develop Pika-X, which was the second generation product used on all Dragon 1 CRS missions that successfully resupplied the space station on 20 missions. Now, Pika 3.0 was developed specifically for use on Dragon 2 crew and cargo, with enhanced structural and thermal properties that optimized the heat shield and drove down cost and mass. The remainder of the Crew Dragon capsule is composed primarily of SpaceX proprietary ablative material. It's another class of thermal protection which is lighter weight versus Pika and protects the underlying composite structure during reentry to ensure structural capabilities are maintained. While Crew Dragon will experience temperatures well over 3,000 degrees Fahrenheit during peak re-entry
9 horas e
conditions,
57 minutos, estamos então aguardando o momento do início da reentrada.
Coupled with the ECLS, or ECLS, Environmental Control and Life Support System in the pressurized interior will ensure that the AX-3 crew will stay cool and comfortable during all phases of re-entry through Splashdown.
Now, missions like this are important, not just for the crew members who fly, but also for the host of scientists and engineers around the world who had an opportunity to have their research or their technology tested in microgravity. And for Axiom Space, this is at the heart of why we do these missions. We are building opportunities for others to advance what is possible and expand on what is known. So for MLA, Walter, Alper, and Marcus, this has been an incredibly successful mission. Just to highlight and recap a little bit, the crew conducted a total of 54 research-associated activities around the mission, both on ground and on ISS. Now, 36 of these were on-orbit experiments and tech demos. This also included a slew of life science biology projects, human research projects, plant-based projects, physical and earth science projects, and like I mentioned, technology demonstrations. Additionally, time was focused on the maintenance of research equipment as well, and also just generally understanding how to live and work in microgravity. So, here are some highlights from their time on board the International Space Station to share with you. Now, on January, Freedom Dragon docked to the ISS, and upon ingress to the ISS, the crew was greeted by the Expedition 70 crew in a welcome ceremony. And this really...
Então, para quem está chegando agora, são 9 horas e 58 minutos pelo horário de Brasília. Então aí estamos aguardando o momento então do início da reentrada da Dragon Freedom na atmosfera da Terra. Lembrando que então a sequência de descida de órbita já se encerrou, e também tivemos a confirmação aí do fechamento do nariz da cápsula da Dragon. Lembrando que o Splashdown então aí está previsto para acontecer por volta aí das 10 horas e 30 minutos no horário de Brasília, aí no Oceano Atlântico, na costa da Flórida. Então estamos acompanhando o retorno da tripulação, da AXIOM-3.
Nose cone secured for entry. SpaceX Dragon, what's up?
What's really cool about all those things that you mentioned is not only is the crew returning, but there's going to be over 550 pounds of research also returning back to Earth with the crew. And Dragon makes that possible. Dragon is designed to carry up to 7 passengers on the vehicle, but today we only have 4 crew members, which means that we can use the additional space currently in this configuration, which is underneath the seats of the 4 crew members, to store cargo. So they're able to bring a lot of that cargo back with them back down to Earth.
That's fantastic. With all of the mission objectives that they accomplished, it's a significant number of science, a significant amount of science that they can bring back home with them. And so to check out more of that, be sure to check out AXIOM-3.
Logo mais, a partir das 21 horas e 25 minutos, pelo horário de Brasília, Vamos
And we've
acompanhar
highlighted some of the
juntos a
research that was
terceira
returning from space
tentativa
on,
para o
from
lançamento
space
aí
on this
da
Dragon, but
missão
we're
Starlink
also
do
big
grupo
proponents of the arts,
73.
right? So it's been very easy over times to make the connection between STEM and spaceflight, or science, technology, engineering, and math, and spaceflight. But over the last few years, we've been seeing a shift from STEM to STEAM. And on this mission, we were able to actually have a number of pieces of artwork that were placed in space. This is an essential part of exploration, and we wanted to showcase that on this mission. So for this mission, we
Então, quem
dedicated
puder aí
space for
deixar o
7
like
pieces aboard
na
Dragon.
transmissão
And
e
this
se
first
inscrever
piece
no
here
canal,
is X-Naught
agradeço aí
Space Seeker by
bastante
Dr.
pela
Cyan Proctor.
audiência de vocês.
Now, she was the pilot
Acompanhar
on
aí neste
Inspiration
momento
4
aqui
mission, and this is a metallic spray-painted
o
canvas
do
with a
retorno da
laser-etched
tripulação
X-Naught
da
hand-painted with golden glitter hues.
AXIOM-3. Então aí
Next
a
piece is a
Terra
photo by
após
David
quase
Krugman
20
entitled 2
dias
Seconds,
no
Then
espaço.
Totality. This was taken of the 2018
Esses 20
solar
dias,
eclipse
eles
in
ficaram então
Greenbrier,
18
Tennessee.
dias em
Our third piece
acoplados
is
na
titled
Estação
Everything You Know
Espacial
and Care About
Internacional,
by
né?
Amber
Lembrando que a
Victoria.
missão
And our fourth item is a
da
photograph by Richard.
AXIOM, né? Começou então aí no dia 18 de janeiro, né? Com lançamento lá no complexo de lançamento número 39A, às 18 horas e 49 minutos, né? Pelo horário de Brasília. Depois tivemos então a sua chegada na Estação Espacial Internacional e também a sua saída no dia 7 de fevereiro de 2024, aí que acontecia por volta das 11 horas 25 minutos. Aí nós acompanhamos então todos esses momentos aqui. Lembrando que semana que vem então teremos aí duas missões importantes, né? Uma delas é o segundo teste de voo do veículo H3 lá do Japão, né? Diretamente então de Tanegashima. E também teremos a missão com a Spacex. Levará então aí o módulo lunar aí da NASA, né? Que fará então o pouso na Lua, né? Que tentará fazer então aí o pouso na Lua.
In science.
I absolutely agree. It's an essential part of just the human experience, and it's essential that it carries itself into these, these forward missions that we're moving into. You can't have any of this creativity without the artistic creativity behind it. So, this brings to light things like commercial missions like AX3, Artemis, the Artemis mission, and also talking about stations. So, regarding the future.
E ainda então neste mês teremos a missão Progress MS-26 pela Rússia. E também aí a nova tripulação da Estação Espacial Internacional, substituindo então a Crew 7, a Crew 8. E hoje pela manhã tivemos aí então o lançamento da Rússia, né? Aí pela missão Cosmos 2575, realizado em Peleski, né? Lá na Rússia. Depois então da transmissão aqui do nosso de agora, né, da AXIOM-3, né, nós vamos então eu vou colocar então para vocês o vídeo, né, aí do momento do lançamento então da Rússia, né, para vocês. Lembrando que ontem também tivemos a segunda tentativa de lançamento pela missão Starlink do grupo 713 na Califórnia, mas deu scrub, né, pela segunda vez, né, devido então a problemas aí com o clima, né, na região, porque lá eles estão aí sofrendo lá com chuvas, né, e ventos fortes. Então a nova tentativa será dada hoje, né, com transmissão iniciando a partir das 9h25 da noite. Então não percam. Também, né, para você acompanhar tudo que acontece aqui no nosso canal, né, peço que vocês aí se inscrevam também, né, sigam o canal nas redes sociais, lá no X e também no Instagram, né, onde lá então eu publico os vídeos dos melhores momentos, né, das transmissões que aconteceram e também, né, as informações aí de publicações aí também da programação da semana e, né, sempre as atualizações mais rápidas acontece lá no X, né? Então no X do nosso canal, a atualização você acompanha com muito mais rapidez. Né? Lembrando que aqui para o pessoal aqui do Brasil, então, nesse momento sou o único que está transmitindo aí para vocês, então, a missão AXIOM-3, o retorno, então, aí da tripulação à Terra. Então, acompanhe aqui com a gente. Aqui vocês não perdem nenhum detalhe, né, de tudo que acontece, então, ao redor do mundo. Todas as missões vocês acompanham aqui. 10h06 pelo horário de Brasília. Aí você também pode ajudar o canal, né, de um monte de várias formas, né? A primeira delas, se inscrevendo aqui no canal e também deixando o like na transmissão e compartilhando também os nossos vídeos e as nossas transmissões. Outra também forma de ajudar o canal é de seguir também nas redes sociais, lá no X e também no Instagram. Ou se ainda preferir, né, você pode também estar ajudando aí o canal, né, doando aí pelo Pix, né, através pelo Pix no QR Code que você encontra na sua tela, ou ainda, se preferir, né, temos aí nossa wishlist do canal. O link se encontra também na descrição da transmissão.
Research opportunities that ultimately impact life on Earth. For us, these Dragon missions are important for safely flying astronauts so that they can conduct science and research and other activities in space, but also because they are laying the foundation for that future where more people from more countries all around the world have an opportunity to travel to space, whether it's low Earth orbit, the moon, Mars,
Lembrando
or
também que para o
beyond.
dia
In the history
entre
of
os
human
dias
spaceflight,
18 ou
less than
19
700 people
de
have
fevereiro,
ever
né,
been to orbit.
teremos
At
mais um
SpaceX, we
lançamento
want to
aí
help create a
pela
future
missão da
where not
Rocket
just
Lab,
hundreds
né,
of
mais um
people,
lançamento
but
então do Electron,
thousands and
já
ultimately
programado
millions
aí
of people can travel
entre os
off of
dias
Earth
18
to
e
live and
19
work in space and
de
other planets.
fevereiro.
Last year, we flew 6 Dragon missions. This year, we could launch up to 8 missions, including 5 or 6 human spaceflight missions, and that's only going to increase in the future. To support our growing manifest of Dragon missions, we've recently made some new upgrades to our other Florida launch pad, Space Launch Complex 40. We're on our way to having 2 launch pads
Estamos vendo aí então a
capable
nova
of supporting
passarela,
human spaceflight
aí
missions,
da
meaning that we'll have more
tripulada,
opportunities for more people to fly
para então
on
as
Dragon's
futuras
orbit.
missões tripuladas aí no complexo
If you're interested in
de
helping us
lançamento
advance
número
the future of
40.
human spaceflight and potentially fly on a future Dragon mission, check out SpaceX.com to learn more.
Por falar então em nova plataforma de lançamento, né?
Now we
Chegaram
are
então
just
aí
about
peças,
7
né,
minutes away
da
from
torre,
LOS. That is the
né,
expected
para a
loss of
construção então
signal
aí
or the
da
communication
lá da plataforma de
signal that we
lançamento
will
aí para as
lose
futuras
during
missões do
re-entry.
Starship na Flórida.
This will be when the plasma begins to build up around the vehicle. That will unfortunately block the communication signal, but we will regain that signal with AOS, or acquisition of signal, about 7 minutes after that.
Right, Jesse, like we mentioned earlier, this is a planned aspect of today's mission. It's an
Estamos
expected
aguardando então
aspect
o
of
momento
today's
do
nominal
retorno do
operations, and so
comunicação
while we're
aí da
waiting for that
Dragon.
loss of signal and then
Nesse
subsequent
momento então a
acquisition of
Dragon
signal,
Freedom
we
está
want to
fazendo
talk through
então
a
aí
little
o
bit of a fun list
procedimento
that the
de
teams have put
reentrada
together
para a
about this mission,
atmosfera
which I
da
think is pretty
Terra.
great. So,
Né,
off the
estamos aí
top,
então com a perda
first
então
5
de
things to know
comunicação
about
já
AX-3.
esperada devido
First, AX-3
então
represents
às
the
altas
first all-European
temperaturas,
commercial
né,
mission to the
devido ao
ISS.
plasma aí da
Second,
reentrada
Walter
então na
became the first
atmosfera.
astronaut to fly to space under the Italian Air Force flag. Also, Alper became the first astronaut for the country of Turkey, and I think that's fantastic. This is an absolutely
10 horas
wonderful
10 minutos,
milestone.
faltando 20 minutos para o Splashdown.
SpaceX Dragon. All 4 crew have tablets secured on satchels, restraints tightened, and visors coming down.
Temos então a comunicação com a Dragon.
SpaceX copies on crew configuration. SpaceX copies.
Okay, and that's a good call from Commander Michael López-Alegría. That crew is getting prepped for their re-entry.
Estamos aguardando então a
And on
reentrada
that, Marcus
inicial.
became also the first project astronaut for ESA, and MLA became the first repeat flyer of a SpaceX Dragon. So he's really racking up those miles.
Estamos
which I
então
love.
aguardando então nesse momento aí
Now, beyond those first, there were a lot of other fun facts. So, for instance, Marcus took with him the Nobel Prize of Swedish author Selma Lagerlöf. Awarded in
É o momento então da
1909, Selma was
reentrada
the first woman to ever receive
na
the Nobel
atmosfera.
Prize for Literature. On a side note, one of her books is an adventure about a boy who rode a goose all over Sweden. And by effect, young readers would learn the geography of the country. So I can definitely see the similarities for Marcus here, who's currently riding a dragon around the world and then communicating back on all the lessons he'll be able to share.
Dragon SpaceX, 5 minutes until predicted comm blackout. See you on the other side at 1323.
Estamos então no momento então a 5 minutos aí do início então da reentrada na atmosfera.
Copy SpaceX, talk to you soon.
Então a reentrada na atmosfera da Terra iniciando aí por volta das 10 horas 17 minutos.
Okay,
No
and
horário
there
de
we also
Brasília.
heard confirmation of an expected LOS time, followed by an expected AOS time of 5:23 Pacific Time AM. Continuing on with MLA, a highlight of his trip here was being able to speak with his alma mater, the U.S. Naval Academy, where he took questions from current midshipmen. And in just over 18 days, docked to the ISS, and an anticipated total mission duration of 23 flight days, this mission now holds the record for the longest AXIOM space mission, eclipsing the previous record set by AX-1 in 2022. This crew also conducted a total of 28 interactive outreach and media events, including 9 events with students around the world. But beyond that, Alper had a conversation with the president of Turkey. Walter engaged with the Italian prime minister. Marcus spoke at the European Space Conference, and MLA spoke with Melissa Navia from Star Trek Strange New Worlds. Also, the AX-3 astronauts performed 56 different experiments, including studying metastatic breast cancer organoids for the Stanford Stem Cell Institute. And we were told the crew was able to see microgravity-induced changes in organoid growth versus how they grow on ground.
That is a very long list of things that this
Para quem está
crew
chegando
did
agora,
on
estamos
board the
aguardando o
International
momento
Space
da
Station, but
reentrada.
all really
Deve
awesome.
começar
It's
por
great
volta
to
das
see
10
that
horas
they
17
also
minutos,
incorporated some
aí
outreach
pelo
events
horário de
throughout
Brasília.
all their science experiments that they had to do while they were working there. So just
Lembrando que o
incredible crew.
Splashdown então está
It was an
previsto para
amazing
correr às
mission. They
10 horas
accomplished all their
30
mission
minutos.
objectives, from media outreach, like you mentioned, Jesse, to all of the science research that was done, and to be able to come back and say, we did it all. That's an amazing feat. And this, like we mentioned at the beginning, this is a mission of firsts for so many countries, for so many agencies. But there's one crew member that we have not gotten to talk about, and she's on board, and her name is Gigi. She is a critical crew member and aspect of the mission. So that's right. Our 5th crew member is our microgravity indicator, Gigi. This is a long-standing tradition in spaceflight and was continued on AX-3. And this tradition is having an indicator inside the spacecraft to provide a visual reference for when the crew has reached weightlessness. So as the 5th crew member of AX-2 and now AX-3, the Gigi's mission is to inspire children around the world to learn about space. Gigi is a Build-A-Bear teddy bear wearing Axiom's Axiom-U spacesuit, just like the ones we are currently building for NASA astronauts to wear on future Artemis missions to the moon. You can get your own full-size, flight-ready Build-A-Bear crew member for all your missions at home. As you can see, she's ready for every adventure.
The zero-G indicator is one of my favorite
Yeah.
parts of crew missions, so very awesome to see Gigi on board with the crew. And speaking of spacesuits, the spacesuits are very unique and custom designed, and you can see there on your screen. They have a 3D printed helmet, and this is actually all a single piece. Everything is connected together. The suit with the helmet is all a single piece. And this suit is actually made to fit fit with the seat. So these are custom suits to the astronauts, but also the suits and the suits and the seats are customized to match each other. And they're really an extension of the Dragon spacecraft. They essentially can provide, nitrox and cooling just as the cabin capsule of the Dragon spacecraft. So very cool, very unique spacesuits that we have here.
Yeah, and I think those suits really highlight an essential element of what is making days like today, days like launch, and flying these missions so important. It's the attention paid to the crew. It's an autonomous vehicle, but
10 horas e 16 minutos pelo horário de Brasília. Estamos aguardando então a confirmação aí no momento do início da reentrada.
Demonstrate that ability to, get crew comfortable, have it customized to their bodies. For their mission, and I think just the suit itself, like you said, it not only looks cool, but it's incredibly functional.
Exactly, and speaking of functional, we are just about under a minute away from that expected loss of signal. So the crew will be going through this blackout period here for about 7 minutes. Again, it's expected. This is the plasma building up around the vehicle as it's heating up. It's getting to about 3,500 degrees Fahrenheit. And so we will continue to check in with the crew. The Corps will continue to check in once we have once we're at about 5:23 a.m. And have that expected acquisition of signal. You may hear some comms of the Corps calling out to the crew just to check to see when we do have that connection again.
Right, and we mentioned earlier, this is a very dynamic day. There's a lot of elements through the day that carry us from, we already experienced undocking a few days ago, but from basically the moment that they've committed now to deorbit and reentry, from here on out, it really is paying attention to these timelined events, the loss of signal that is expected, the acquisition of signal that we have a known time to be pinging crew and seeing how they're doing, followed immediately by a lot of very dynamic back-to-back events, right? We're looking for the drogue parachutes to deploy. We're looking for visual confirmation of the vehicle coming in, and then ultimately followed by splashdown and recovery. It's going to be a very dynamic
10 horas e 17
yeah, it's
minutos.
getting really exciting. We're just under 15 minutes from their splashdown. The crew
Estamos aí então em progresso, momento então da reentrada. Nesse momento estamos em reentrada com a atmosfera da Terra, como vocês podem ver.
Again, if you're
Então,
just now
agora, nesse
joining
momento,
us,
estamos no
at
período
this
de
point we
blackout
are in the
de comunicação
communications blackout
aí
period,
com a
which is
Dragon,
expected to last
devido então
approximately
à
7 minutes
reentrada
due to the
com a
plasma
atmosfera da
formation
Terra.
around the spacecraft. During this time, no vehicle telemetry is received by mission control or the recovery team, and no external commanding of the vehicle or voice communications is possible. As a reminder, Dragon is designed to fly itself and continues to autonomously use Draco thrusters to orient itself during reentry. During reentry, the vehicle will be slowing down from orbital velocity, which is approximately 17,500 miles per hour. The top temperature Dragon will experience upon reentry is about
Lembrando então que esse período de comunicação, né, com a Dragon, né, demora então de entre 6 e 7 minutos.
The suits being an extension of that spacecraft. The
Aí agora é só esperar
capsule,
então o momento então
the capsule cabin
da
is being
volta com a
cooled with
comunicação
nitrox,
da
but also
Dragon
the suits are also being cooled with nitrox, and this is to help keep the crew comfortable as they're going through this very hot period of time. Again, that's 3,500 degrees on the outside of the vehicle, so they might start to feel a little bit of that on the inside of the cabin, but that is what the flowing of nitrox is for, is to keep the cabin cool while it's going through this hot period.
Right, and it highlights an essential element of what you need for today, right? That flight suit is a very critical element for their trip home, and so keeping them not only comfortable, but also just that physiology in check. That life support system, it's doing its work with that nitrox, like you said, to keep them cool, keep them comfortable, and it is an extension of the vehicle. But with that type of dynamic day, it's very critical that that suit is performing its function, and we're looking forward to getting crew home at the end of this.
Yeah, we still have about 4 minutes left in this blackout period. And the crew is expected to splash down on the Atlantic side of the Florida Panhandle, off the coast of Daytona, Florida. And we do have our recovery vessel Shannon on that side
Então, lembrando
of
que
Florida, which
o
is
Splashdown deve
currently
ocorrer ali
waiting for the crew to splash down and will
ali
begin
próximo,
its,
então, à
their
costa da Flórida,
recovery
né, perto ali da
operations to
região
recover the
de
crew.
Daytona.
Once they splash down in the ocean, we will do some safety checks, but then the recovery crew will start to make their way
10 minutos
to
para
the
o
capsule
splashdown.
and start performing recovery operations.
Right.
10 horas e 20
Yeah, and at this
minutos.
point, you know, during this blackout, like we said, when we come to acquisition
Nós
signal,
estamos
there's
então aí
certain
já
things
no
that we're
momento
looking
da
for, and one of
reentrada.
those is definitely going
Nós
to be a
estamos
visual
aguardando o
cue
retorno
of
da
that vehicle coming
comunicação aí
back
da
in,
Dragon.
followed by other visual cues like the drogue chutes deploying, and then followed by those main chutes. And I think that's a really cool. It's a really cool system, but it's also very essential to get that crew going, or the vehicle moving from the speed that it's moving down to another comfortable
Não se
pace. It's like a
esqueça,
staged
claro, de
approach
deixar o like
to
aí
get
na
them to a comfortable
transmissão e
landing
se
so that
inscrever no
Shannon
canal.
can go and perform safe recovery and greeting operations.
Yeah, I actually think it's pretty incredible that, you know, while you're in orbit, you're traveling 17,500 miles per hour. But throughout this 7-minute period of reentry, it is slowing down the vehicle so much down to 350 miles per hour. That is an extreme slowdown in such a short period of time.
Right.
And then the drogue and the main parachutes also keep the vehicle safe. It helps slow the vehicle down even more so that the vehicle can touch down softly on the ocean.
Right, and then once it does, you know, those parachutes are jettisoned essentially, and those are going to be recovered by other vehicles. So again, as part of kind of that, the operations of what today is going to look like after splashdown, it's still going to be very dynamic. There's still going to be a lot of activity on the ground to ensure that we're safely approaching crew, that we're keeping them safe, but that also we are making as swift contact as we can to ensure that, you know, now that they have traveled from 17,500 all the way down, coming back, and there you can see the recovery vessel, a live shot of that. We're going to see a bit more
E aí
of
já
that
estamos
later
vendo
today.
imagens aí da equipe de resgate,
We
então aí
are
da
just
Dragon.
about a minute away from the expected acquisition of signal. Again, we are currently in a
10
blackout
horas e
period.
22 minutos.
Once we reach the point of expected AOS,
Estamos acompanhando
the
então as
crawler will
imagens,
begin
estamos aí
to call
aguardando então
out
o
to the
momento
crew
da
to establish communication
primeiras
once
imagens
again. So
então
we
aí
may
da
start
Dragon
hearing those
Freedom
call-outs
após o
here shortly.
retorno aí
But again,
da
still in
reentrada então da
the blackout
atmosfera.
period, but expected to come out of that in just about a minute.
Exactly right, and you can see there on your screen MCC X in Hawthorne here in California, as well as MCC A in Houston, Texas, are constantly monitoring the situation that we have for crew coming back down. They are supporting crew throughout this entire.
Dragon SpaceX, comm check.
E aí, portanto, reentrada concluída. 10 horas e 23 minutos pelo horário de Brasília, reentrada concluída. Estamos aí já de volta então à atmosfera da Terra.
And we did hear that call out that we have confirmation of
Então aí nosso próximo evento, então aí será então a liberação aí dos paraquedas
inside of Dragon Freedom.
da Dragon Freedom.
Now we're just about 3 minutes away from drogue parachute deployment. And there you can see a live view from the ground.
Então nós estamos vendo aí neste momento no lado esquerdo da sua tela a Dragon Freedom.
Yeah, this is a beautiful example of exactly what we were just talking about during the loss of comms phase. Upon acquisition of signal, we are looking for good comm checks with the crew, which we got, and visual confirmation of the vehicle, which we got.
Dragon SpaceX, GPS has converged. Expect nominal drogue deploy altitude.
Então ainda temos imagens aí no visual, né, da Dragon.
Good comms between the core and the crew. And again, we are just a couple minutes away from drogue parachutes deploying. And just under a minute after the drogue parachutes deploy, and currently you can see on your screen that they are reconfiguring their seats. So you can see that the seats are rotating down, and that is happening live right now in preparation for splashdown.
Yeah.
Brace for drogue window.
And looked like the seat rotation was completed, and now they are ready for those drogue parachutes to deploy.
Estamos aguardando então o momento da liberação do paraquedas da Dragon.
What you're seeing on your screen is a live view of the Dragon capsule returning back to Earth. And there
E a
you can see
liberação do
the drogue
paraquedas.
parachutes have deployed.
Paraquedas
A
liberado.
cool view from the capsule itself. Shortly after, we should see the 4 main chutes deploy here.
Estamos vendo então aí o momento da liberação aí do paraquedas da Dragon
Visual
Freedom.
on 2 healthy drogues and descent rate nominal.
And excellent call-outs there.
See the same, Arthur.
And we do have visual confirmation that the drogues have deployed. Now just waiting for the 4 main parachutes to deploy as well.
E aí o momento então da liberação
And
dos
there you can
paraquedas
see on your
principais.
screen, 4 mains have deployed. They will begin
dos
to
4
slowly
paraquedas
open up
principais.
and help slow the vehicle,
Aí da Dragon Freedom.
down. The vehicle is approximately moving at 119 miles per hour, and the main chutes deployed at 6,500
Então o momento
feet.
então da abertura.
There's an awesome
Aí do
view from
paraquedas.
the capsule itself, looking up at the 4 main
Visual on
chutes.
4 healthy mains and descent rate nominal.
10 horas e 27 minutos.
Copy. We show ourselves at 1,000 meters.
3 minutos para o toque na água.
Copy 1,000.
1 quilômetro.
Got some good call-outs there. And just a few minutes away from the AXIOM-3 crew splashing down back on Earth here.
Estamos então nos aproximando aí do momento do Splashdown.
SpaceX Dragon, 800 meters.
800
Copy
metros.
800.
And what you're hearing is call-outs of the ground and the crew on board, monitoring the altitude of the vehicle and the crew as they're making their way back down to Earth.
$600 meters.
600 metros.
600.
Again, we're just a couple minutes away from splashdown. Landing in water is simpler, therefore more reliable than landing on land.
Estamos
And
a
there you can see
600
an
metros.
awesome view.
Do toque na água.
The Dragon capsule, Dragon Freedom, carrying AX-3 as it's
400.
400 metros.
slowly making its way to splashdown.
Now, these are absolutely fantastic views that we got at acquisition of signal, Jesse. It was incredible coming back from AOS to see those good comm checks, those good visual confirmations of the vehicle coming in, and then the visual confirmations of the first drogue chutes, which deployed beautifully, and followed by the main chutes. And additionally, we got to see crew even rotate their seats to prepare for splashdown. All of these are
200. Crew brace for
200.
splashdown.
Copy, braced for splashdown.
E Splashdown. Splashdown às 10 horas e 30 minutos pelo horário de Brasília. Temos aí confirmando o Splashdown da Dragon Freedom. Bem-vindos de volta à Terra.
Copy.
Então, Dragon Freedom toca na água às 10 horas e 30 minutos. Aí, então, bem-vindo de volta aí a tripulação da AXIOM-3. Então, aí, retorno realizado com sucesso.
As you can see on your screen, we have visual confirmation of splashdown of the Dragon spacecraft. Dragon Freedom has returned home with the AX-3 crew.
Dragon SpaceX, can you repeat your last call? It cut out for post-splashdown observations.
Então, às 10 horas e 30 minutos no horário de Brasília. Então, tivemos aí contato com a água, toque na água, splashdown. Confirmando, então, aí o retorno da tripulação privada AXIOM-3 à Terra.
The SpaceX recovery ship and team have been waiting for Dragon splashdown, and they will now begin to make their way to the splashdown
SpaceX
location.
confirm environmental assessment is not necessary.
SpaceX confirms, not necessary.
Some good comms there. The teams have been ready and waiting about 3 nautical miles away, so it's going to take them about 30 minutes to make their way to our crew inside of Dragon. And once they do approach, they will do some quick safety checks to make sure that it is safe for the crew to egress the Dragon vehicle. Then they will begin to prepare the Dragon capsule to be lifted back on or onto the recovery ship, which they will then open the hatch and the crew can egress from the Dragon capsule. These are some great daytime views of Dragon splashdown. AX-3 crew still inside of the Dragon capsule, waiting for their recovery vessel Shannon and recovery crew to come pick them up.
Yeah, this has been an absolutely picture-perfect splashdown, and these views are really highlighting that. And it's not just beautiful; it's an essential tool for ensuring that we keep eyes on this Dragon, right? But you can't deny that being able to watch, get confirmation of parachute deploy, get visual confirmation of the vehicle coming in, and then seeing that landing, in addition to commander's calls down to crew, all painted a wonderful example of a lockstep splashdown day. And it's been absolutely fantastic. And you can see Dragon sitting there in the Atlantic with chutes deployed, and crew is comfortable and safe and healthy, and they are waiting now for Shannon to make first contact to begin the recovery operations. It's going to be, again, like we mentioned earlier, a lot of dynamic aspects over the next 30 minutes as crew makes their way, as ground crews make their way to Dragon, and then as they begin to prep Dragon for hoisting it into the vehicle.
And you could also see in the background, the camera has now tilted away, but you could see Shannon and 2 fast boats making their way towards the Dragon capsule, the recovery team on their way to help the crew.
Dragon SpaceX, SpaceX is go for recovery personnel to approach. Expect personnel alongside in approximately 1 minute. And on behalf of SpaceX, welcome home. Thanks for flying SpaceX.
Flying SpaceX was our pleasure, and 1 minute to the recovery operation.
Speaking of fast boats, that was pretty fast. They're just about a minute away, and you can see them now there live on the screen, the fast boats approaching very quickly.
Yeah, and like you said, it was faster than anticipated, but it's an example of when you have teams prepped and you have you've done your homework to know where crew's coming back. It's an example of how Axiom and SpaceX are ready to receive their crew back on land.
Para esse momento, a equipe de resgate já se aproxima aí da cápsula então da Dragon Freedom.
And you can see the recovery
Para iniciar então o procedimento de resgate da nave.
The Dragon Freedom
Lembrando que a nave Dragon Freedom então fez o seu splashdown, né, o toque na água. Aí às 10 horas 30 minutos pelo horário de
Has
Brasília.
already autonomously completed some of the safety inspections following splashdown, and now the recovery team will also perform a few safety checks just to make sure.
Dragon SpaceX request permission to come aboard via the display camera view only.
You're welcome to come aboard, Arthur, and just for your essay, all 4 crew members are feeling well.
SpaceX copies, great news.
Sounds like we might get a view inside of the Dragon capsule at our crew. And there you can see the recovery team reaching out to Dragon. They will actually climb
agora
onto
estamos vendo aí
the
o momento
Dragon
então
capsule, perform some safety
do
checks
início, né, do
to make
procedimento
sure
então de
that it is
resgate da
safe for
cápsula
the
da
vehicle,
Dragon.
for the crew members inside of the vehicle to egress, and then begin operations to prepare the capsule to be lifted back onto the, not
Estamos
back
então nos
onto the
preparando aí
recovery ship, but
para
onto the recovery
o
vessel
momento então
once the recovery
do
vessel
resgate, né, para o
is
barco.
there.
Aí
Exactly right, Jesse. And with that
cápsula
call
Dragon.
to the crew on Dragon, with a great live view there of
Estamos aí com agora
inside
imagens
the
internas da
Dragon Freedom
Dragon.
capsule. We heard MLA call that all 4 crew members are feeling good. They're feeling well. They're feeling healthy. So this is fantastic. That first fast boat made good initial contact, and like you mentioned, is ready to kind of press into the next phase of operations here as we pull that Dragon back into the recovery vessel. You can also see on your screen the second fast boat, which provides redundant support to the primary fast boat, which made initial contact. In addition to helping just keep that area secure, right? Redundancy is a key aspect of spaceflight operations, not only on ground and in orbit, but also during recovery. In addition to that recovery, they're also working on that parachute recovery. So we saw that Dragon had jettisoned its parachutes after deployment and after splashdown. And this fast boat, as well as another jet ski, are helping to recover that parachute to, again, keep that area secure, to not inhibit any operations that are going to be underway while that
Lembrando que o
primary
splashdown
fast boat's
ocorreu
making
então às
contact
10
and doing
horas
its work,
30
but also
minutos
Oceano's
pelo
coming
horário
up right
de
behind it.
Brasília. Aí na costa da Flórida, no Oceano Atlântico, próximo então à região de Daytona.
There's that jet ski passing by. Part of the recovery team. And again, what you're seeing here is a live view of the AX-3 crew inside of Dragon Freedom, now splashed down on Earth.
Estamos aí com a
The
visão agora
recovery
de
team is
infravermelho.
performing their recovery operations. Again, just waiting for them to perform some safety checks.
Normal.
We did get some good comms earlier that the crew is feeling good after splashdown. They had a pretty dynamic adventure this morning. And now hopefully get to relax a little bit while they're, waiting for the Dragon lift onto the recovery vehicle.
Right, dynamic, but completely according to plan. It was a beautiful execution of a splashdown day, and you can tell their crew is visors up. They're looking healthy and happy, and I think they're probably really looking forward to that first breath of fresh air.
If you're just now joining us, the AX-3 crew has returned from space after being in space for about 21 days. They undocked from the International
Então,
Space
após
Station a
21
couple of
dias
days
no
ago and
espaço,
are now back on
então a
Earth.
nave
The
Dragon
recovery
Freedom
crew, again,
retorna à Terra.
performing their recovery operations. These are
Então,
standard
confirmado então aí
procedures.
21 dias que
They're
eles
currently
ficaram
making sure that the
aí
vehicle
no
is
espaço,
safe.
sendo 18 deles na Estação
Then we
Espacial
should see
Internacional.
one of the crew members hop on board the Dragon capsule and begin operations to prepare the capsule for lifting onto the recovery vessel.
Splashdown então aconteceu às 10 horas e 30 minutos, aí na costa da Flórida, no Oceano Atlântico. Estamos agora iniciando o procedimento aí para o resgate, né, e o embarque então ainda para o barco.
This is an excellent side-by-side view showing on, you know, basically, this is still the dynamic phase of operations, right? Crews splash down, they're safe and healthy, their visors up. But at the same time, everybody still has a job to do. So on the right, you can still see crew inside the capsule looking over the shoulders of Commander Michael López-Alegría and pilot Walter Villadei as they monitor their vehicle systems and stay in contact with ground crews here, with core at SpaceX. And then on the left, you can see as the primary fast boat has made first contact, initial contact with the Dragon Freedom after its splashdown coming in from space. And at this point, they are maintaining that contact and just ensuring that the area is safe, that the vehicle is safe to continue those hoisting operations. So I love being able to see these views side by side to help everybody maintain that awareness exactly of what's going on outside the vehicle, but also in.
There you can see on your screen that the recovery crew member there is doing some checks, some ordnance and hypergol checks at the moment. Again, making sure that the vehicle is safe to approach. Then they can climb onto the capsule, begin rigging operations, and prepare the vehicle to be lifted onto the recovery vessel. Today is Shannon. Shannon is making its way to the recovery zone here. But these fast boats, and we did see a jet ski also with the crew, make their way a little bit faster and get the recovery process started sooner until the recovery vessel makes its way to the landing zone. What you're seeing is a live view of the AX-3 crew inside of Dragon Freedom. patiently waiting for their recovery operations. They've made their way back down to Earth, and the recovery team is working their standard procedures in preparation for lifting the capsule out of the water and onto the recovery vessel, and then eventually will egress the crew for the first time in about 3 weeks.
Yeah. Yeah, at this point, we're waiting for those ordnance and hypergol checks to complete.
Dragon SpaceX, hypergol sweeps, and unfired ordnance checks nominal. Rigging in progress. Approximately 5 minutes until capsule lift. Stand by for PMC with SpaceX flight surgeon.
Copy LR, sir. Standing by.
And almost on call. That was an excellent call from crew to Dragon, saying that the hypergol checks are complete and the ordnance checks are complete, and they all completed nominal. So with that, we were able to proceed to the next phase of the
Então aí nesse momento
operations,
estamos
which
aguardando
allows,
só a fase então aí de resgate, né?
rigging to begin, so we can
Aí já
hoist,
iniciando neste momento.
Dragon Freedom into
É
Shannon.
10 horas e
And we also
46
heard there that
minutos
crew
pelo
will be
horário
having their,
de Brasília. Estamos
the
então
PMC,
acompanhando o retorno
medical
e o
conference with
Splashdown, né, que
SpaceX,
aconteceu aí às 10
with
horas e
SpaceX
30
Medical,
minutos na costa da
and,
Flórida.
just checking in on crew, but as we reported
E
earlier,
agora
or as
estamos aí
Emily
na fase
reported
então de
earlier, the crew's
resgate
feeling healthy and happy to
da
be home.
nave então
Their
Dragon
visors are
Freedom,
up, they are monitoring their systems,
aí
and
com a
over the next
tripulação
25 minutes we should be able to get them on board.
AXIOM-3, né, que ficou então aí no espaço 21 dias. Lembrando que a missão deles iniciou no dia 18 de janeiro, né, com o lançamento lá na plataforma 39A, no Centro Espacial Kennedy, né, com o Falcon 9. E depois tivemos então a saída da Estação Espacial Internacional, aí no dia 7 de fevereiro. E hoje, então, 9 de fevereiro, o retorno, então, aí à Terra com o Splashdown. Logo mais vocês poderão acompanhar depois os melhores momentos aí da transmissão de hoje, né, no nosso canal, o IPTV. Aí estamos vendo então o barco de resgate
And there you can see
da
on your
cápsula
screen
Dragon.
our recovery vessel Shannon, patiently waiting
Então já se
for the
preparando aí
crew and
para
capsule to be ready
fazer então a
for
captura
lifting
da Dragon.
onto the recovery vessel. You can also see on Shannon there is that landing pad there. That's because a helicopter is going to come and take the astronauts or the crew back to land. That's a much faster trip than, taking the recovery vessel all the way back to shore. So that's what that landing pad is for.
That's right. If you're just joining us, AXIOM-3 crew has splashed down in the Atlantic Ocean at 5:30 a.m. Pacific time or 8:30 a.m. Eastern time. And at this point, we are waiting for that recovery, the recovery efforts to continue. SpaceX team has made first contact with the Dragon Freedom capsule and crew. Crew reported all nominal health checks. They're feeling good and excited to be home. And at this point, we are waiting for those rigging operations to continue to get Dragon onto Shannon, that recovery vessel, so that they can have their final medical checks and get on that helicopter and get back home, get back to land.
Yeah, I'm sure the crew's pretty excited to be back home. Mm-hmm. Pretty excited to take a breath of fresh air, as you mentioned.
Exactly. Right, excited to be home after, the 3 weeks in orbit, right? 23 flight days, 21 days, 18 days aboard the International Space Station, where they accomplished a suite of activities.
Dragon SpaceX comm check on Dragon to ground public.
clear.
And Dragon, you're coming in choppy. We have pretty ready comm right now, so we're going to take some steps to reconfigure Dragon communications before we step into the PMC.
Copy, SpaceX.
Some comms between the core, the
Estamos
crew,
vendo então aí na
operations
sua
and
tela, né, os
resources engineer to the
demonstradores
crew.
aí da
And what you're seeing on your screen is the
SpaceX, né, fazendo
recovery
então o
team,
procedimento
again, a
então
crew
aí
member on the
da manobra então
capsule,
de resgate
beginning rigging
da Dragon Freedom,
for preparation of lifting the
né, fazendo
capsule
então
out of the
o
water
momento então da
and
preparação,
onto the recovery
né,
vessel.
para o momento aí então aí do embarque. Aí de volta então a embarque então aí para a saída então da tripulação logo.
And this is really great that we had a daytime splashdown. We're getting some really excellent views of all of these operations happening.
Imagens
It's a
belíssimas, né,
beautiful
que a
early morning for
SpaceX
Splashdown. The
então
weather's
aí
looking
traz
fantastic.
para nós, né?
The local environment is looking fantastic for crews to perform these operations, right? We mentioned earlier that this is really a safety critical aspect of the mission. And one that's important to note that we talked about training earlier too, and this aspect of the mission is something that these crews train for heavily. This fast boat recovery team, the entire recovery team efforts, all train for their specific roles in today's operations like this. And when the weather is playing nominally with you like this, it allows for that to execute quite well. And so we're able to see these teams really execute kind of a picture-perfect recovery effort. Rigging is going smoothly, and they're progressing well into it at this point, and we're waiting for those next steps to be able to hoist Dragon into Shannon.
Yeah, you mentioned, training for these operations. Throughout this entire mission, everybody's following standard procedures. The crew has tablets inside of the capsule with them where they can follow, their procedures, basically their instructions. And the recovery team does the same thing. They're following very standard procedures, going step by step, and making sure that they perform every step carefully and having verification of each one of those steps. So while it may look like they're just doing their work, they're actually, following very specific instructions.
Exactly.
Não se esqueça de deixar o like na transmissão, né? E também de se inscrever no canal. Então, como vocês podem observar, ali a equipe da equipe de resgate então, da SpaceX já então faz os preparativos aí para então fazer o ingresso da cápsula Dragon no barco de resgate. No caso ali, botando então a corda ali para fazer então a preparação para então fazer o ingresso ali no barco de resgate, unidade, né?
Honestly, the recovery team must be just as excited as the crew.
Então acoplado ali
They're
no
going to be the
unidade.
first people
that
they get to see when they egress the Dragon capsule. So this is really special. I'm sure the recovery crew, probably really enjoys their job.
Oh yeah, yeah. Well, to play such a pivotal role in these operations, right? Crew has been, from launch until now, they've been away from their friends and family and away from Earth. And to be that crew that helps greet them and ensure that they're safely brought in, right? Mm-hmm. Following the procedures, doing your job to make sure that this crew is getting safely brought out of the water and into the vehicle, and then be able to see them smile and see everybody smile at the end of it. It's got to be a wonderful feeling.
Yeah, I can't even imagine how exciting that must be. Again, a live view inside of the Dragon Freedom capsule with our crew members of the AX-3 crew. And there's a view of the recovery vessel. That is where the Dragon will be lifted out of the water and will sit in that little nest that you see there, that ring on the vessel.
I think it's a perfect name for holding a Dragon. I think that was
Exactly,
intentional,
yeah.
right? Yeah.
Definitely.
Estão aguardando
Right, so
o
it's a
momento do
great view that
ingresso,
kind of,
aí estão no
you know,
barco
to
de
me
resgate.
signifies what Shannon's
nave-
role in this
a
operation
cápsula
is,
da
right? Right
Dragon
now it's sitting and
Freedom.
waiting while making approach, while the primary
Está sendo
contact team is
preparada aí
ensuring that that
para-
rigging is,
para
you
ser
know,
resgatada aí através do
executed
uso do
properly,
guindaste.
but then also verified and
Está
checked,
então acoplada
as
no
you
barco
mentioned,
de
part of the
resgate.
procedures prior to performing the hoist operation to get Dragon into its comfortable nest. And at that point, we have additional crew members, like you said, that we're going to be very excited to get this Dragon on board. But it takes time, and we've got to go a little slow, because slow is smooth, and then smooth is fast, and
Lembrando
that
que a
allows
nossa
us to
próxima missão
get crew on
tripulada
board.
será aí no dia 22 de
Yeah, and
fevereiro.
once Dragon is
Com o
in that
lançamento
nest,
então
we saw that it
Crew
was
8.
near the end of the ship. It will actually slide forward to position itself next to a platform, which will be level with the hatch. So when they open the hatch, the astronauts can egress
Então estamos vendo aí o
comfortably
barco de
out of
navio
the
barco de
Dragon capsule
resgate.
Excellent service. And that is a beautiful shot if you're just tuning in to see Shannon, the recovery vessel, SpaceX's recovery vessel in the Atlantic, ready to meet and greet and
também
hoist
serve aí
the
como uso
AX-3 crew
para
upon
os
their
pousos,
splashdown today off the coast of Florida.
né, da Falcon 9.
And for those wondering what this landing pad is for, again, once the crew egresses the vehicle, they will, do some safety and health checks to make sure that the crew is healthy. But then they'll board a helicopter that's going to land on that landing pad that will take them back to land pretty quickly. So they've got some great service, as you mentioned.
10 horas e 57 minutos pelo horário
And
de
what's excellent about
Brasília.
this view too is you can
Estamos
really
então
see a lot
acompanhando o
of
momento de fase
aspects
de
of
resgate
these
aí da
operations kind of play out.
cápsula Dragon Freedom.
Dragon SpaceX, ComCheck.
Estão se preparando aí para ingressar no barco de resgate aí da SpaceX.
Copy. We have you the same. We are transmitting through Shannon recovery vessel now, and with this, I'm going to try and set up the quick PMC with flight surgeon.
Okay, standing by.
Nós estamos então aí desde o início trabalhando aí nas operações, então aí da fase de retorno da Dragon, acompanhando todos os detalhes aqui com vocês. Lembrando que logo mais, então a partir das 21 horas e 25 minutos, iniciaremos então a nossa transmissão para a terceira tentativa então de lançamento para a missão Starlink. E lembrando sempre que qualquer novidade, né, de mudança de horário das nossas transmissões, vocês aí têm que acompanhar lá no nosso canal, então lá no X, né, para poder aí acompanhar tudo que acontece aqui no nosso canal UPTV. Trazendo sempre o melhor tudo para vocês.
Core and Commander López-Alegría on Dragon Freedom, waiting to establish some communications so that they can talk with SpaceX medical surgeon. But during that time,
Aí vamos transmitir então até o último homem,
are continuing to make
no caso até o
operations
último
or proceed through
tripulante aí
operations to
da
prepare
Dragon Freedom, né, sair
for
então aí da
hoist into the
cápsula
recovery vessel
Dragon.
Shannon. So you can see on your left there the initial fast boat that made initial covery and proceeded through rigging operations for the Dragon spacecraft, and the recovery vessel Shannon nearing or making closer approach
11 horas pelo horário de Brasília.
to Dragon to begin the hoisting operations.
Lembrando então que logo mais aí teremos aí os melhores momentos aí desta fase aí então de retorno da Dragon Freedom à Terra.
There you can see, as John
Então,
mentioned,
nesse
the
momento, a
recovery vessel is
Dragon
now
Freedom, né, se prepara então aí para fazer um
beginning to
ingresso
pull the Dragon capsule towards
aí no
it.
barco de resgate.
Dragon SpaceX, we are back on Dragon to Ground Public.
Loud and clear.
Imagens belíssimas aí desse momento então do resgate aí da Dragon Freedom no Oceano Atlântico aí na costa da Flórida.
I think what's amazing about this shot, Jesse, is it looks like it's all so simple. And the care and precision that has to go into this operation from all of the teams that you see, that you can't even see in this shot, that are supporting this type of operation, is amazing. To allow for that hydraulic lift now to come down and begin this hoisting operation.
Nesse momento, o
All of
guindaste
this was
da
a very
Dragon
tightly choreographed dance to get us to this point, and it's really exciting to
então
see us getting here to where we're about
a
to hoist
operação então de
Dragon into the
de
nest.
ingresso.
Yeah, exactly. It may look
Aí, então,
easy,
da
but
cápsula
it is,
Dragon
you know, a
Freedom.
lot of training, a lot of effort, a lot of planning goes
Yes.
into these operations. And as you said, very exciting. The hydraulic lift is now down, and they will begin to start to lift the Dragon capsule here shortly. We'll lift the capsule onto the deck of the recovery vessel, into the nest that you see there. That's that circular ring there on the deck. And again, once the Dragon capsule is seated,
Dragon SpaceX, approximately 5 minutes until capsule lift.
5 minutos então para o ingresso.
We copy, SpaceX.
good update there, just about 5 minutes away from lift. Again, once the capsule is in that nest on the deck, that nest will actually slide forward to put Dragon next to a platform that will make it much easier for the crew to egress the Dragon capsule.
Right, and once they egress, they'll be greeted by SpaceX and AXIOM medical professionals to just ensure that, you know, hey, we just want to make sure you're doing okay, everything's going all right. Do those first initial checks, and then at that point, crew is able to step out and take their first steps too, for the first steps in a number of weeks.
Yeah, very, very exciting. Again, very cool that the crew on board this recovery vessel gets to be the first to
11 horas
greet
3 minutos.
the crew after they've been in space for a few weeks.
Dragon SpaceX, brace for capsule lift.
Bracing.
And a nice big jump into the ocean for the recovery crew, completing their rigging operations.
Nesse momento, então, aí a Dragon faz então aí seu ingresso
vessel Shannon.
aí no barco de resgate aí da SpaceX.
I love that they mentioned to brace for the lift.
Yeah.
You could see that the vehicle is moving and swaying a little bit, but
Yeah.
I'm sure it was nothing compared to reentry.
Oh yeah, yeah. Cruise had a lot of dynamic operations associated with today, and this is one of the final ones. There's a few more that have to go into play before they're back on land. But this moment of getting them finally back out of the water and into this nest, situated while they're comfortable, is a wonderful moment for the AX-3 crew.
And a great choreographed lift there. Gently setting down the Dragon capsule onto the nest.
It's important for this point too, right after that lift, to kind of orient it just right so that it's ready for that translation maneuver you talked about, while also ensuring that crew is staying in a comfortable, well-oriented position so that egress operations are as smooth as they can be.
Yeah, this gives you a good view of that hatch that the crew is going to egress from. You can see that it's pretty much in the middle of the capsule, so moving it towards the platform, that platform will be just at the bottom of that hatch. And that hatch has been closed since they left Earth.
Dragon SpaceX, welcome aboard the recovery vessel. Recovery personnel are completing final checks.
11h06 pelo horário de Brasília. Estamos aí concluindo então a fase de resgate da Dragon Freedom.
SpaceX Dragon, we copy.
Nesse momento a Dragon Freedom se encontra então a bordo do barco de resgate.
Good calls there between Core and Commander
Segurança.
López-Alegría to confirm that crew is that we are preparing to press into the egress phase of today's operations. But yeah, Jesse, you mentioned that.
Agora nesse momento, né, vamos iniciar aí a fase da saída então da tripulação da AXIOM-3, aí de dentro então da Dragon Freedom, a abertura então da escotilha.
Once they close that door on launch day, it doesn't open until today.
And I'm sure the crew is very excited for that side hatch to open.
E nós vamos então acompanhar todos esses momentos aqui. Todos os detalhes, então, vocês acompanham tudo por aqui no nosso canal WillPTV. Então, para quem está chegando agora, estamos acompanhando o momento então aí já da fase então, de resgate concluída, né, às 11h06, com o resgate feito então aí e colocado então a bordo, né, do barco de resgate aí a cápsula da Dragon Freedom, que ficou no espaço aí por 21 dias, sendo 18 deles a Estação Espacial Internacional aí com a tripulação da AXIOM-3. E a nossa próxima fase agora, então aí será o momento então aí da abertura da escotilha e a saída então dos astronautas. Lembrando que a nossa próxima transmissão então será à noite, a partir das 21h25, com a terceira tentativa de lançamento para a missão Starlink do grupo 713 lá na Califórnia. Fazer um rápido intervalo, né? Logo estarei de volta. Vocês ficam aí acompanhando as imagens então aí da fase de resgate, né, sendo concluída. Estamos aí com imagens de dentro então da Dragon Freedom. Logo então estarei de volta novamente.
That's right. If you're just joining us, we're in the final phases of the recovery of the Splashdown.
11h10, você está assistindo então ao canal WillPTV.
Earlier today at 5:30 a.m. Pacific time or 8:30 a.m. Eastern time off the coast of Florida in the Atlantic Ocean. We're in those final phases of recovery efforts, which is the next step up being hatch open. So this will be the first time that crew has exited that side hatch in over 3 weeks, or about 3 weeks, or 23 flight days and 21 days in space. Crew is currently in the Dragon vehicle, but on board the recovery vessel Shannon, as ground crews are still preparing some final tweaks and preparations to translate the vehicle into a position that crew can egress.
If you're just now joining us, you are watching live coverage of the AX-3 splashdown and recovery, currently in progress. On your left-hand screen, you can see that the Dragon capsule, Dragon Freedom, is on board our recovery vessel, Shannon. The recovery crew is doing their final checks prior to the translation of the capsule towards the egress platform. The next event coming up will be side hatch opening up, and that will be the first time that the hatch will be opened since launch day, and the AXIOM-3 crew will take their first breath of fresh air since boarding Falcon 9 at the start of their mission on January 18th. You can see the crew live on your right-hand screen inside of the Dragon capsule, again patiently waiting.
Right, ground crews are still walking through their procedural checks and verifications to ensure that Dragon is in a safe position to translate, and it looks like they have made that call. So you can see Dragon there translating now.
Very exciting. I'm sure the crew can feel that movement, and they're getting really excited for that hatch to open. There's that egress platform that we've been mentioning.
De volta agora, 11 horas 14 minutos, pelo horário de Brasília. Estamos acompanhando, então, o retorno da tripulação da Axioma AX3 após 21 dias no espaço. Lembrando que o Splashdown, então, aconteceu às 10 horas 30 minutos no horário de Brasília. E agora, então, neste momento, estamos acompanhando a fase, então, da despressurização da cápsula Dragon Freedom e a abertura, então, da sua escotilha para essa retirada, então, aí da tripulação da AXIOM-3.
And a good view inside of Dragon. We have the commander on the left-hand side, pilot on the right-hand side. You can see the displays there.
Dragon SpaceX, ground team is making final preps for hatch open. Stand by for side hatch opening.
Standing by.
And you could see those displays. Right behind that display is the hatch, and that is what the crew is looking at. So as soon as that side hatch opens, the crew will be able to see the recovery crew and the medical crew. They're waiting there for them.
Right, and these are those initial checks that we talked about. The first people that the crew is greeted by is by the medical teams to just ensure that they're doing well after their flight and after their return home, and they'll make some medical assessments and make sure they're okay. And at that point, crew is egressing the vehicle and onto that helicopter ride back home.
Estamos aí fazendo os preparativos para a abertura da escotilha. Abertura da escotilha, neste momento, 11 horas e 16 minutos.
Welcome home, crew of AX3.
Bem-vindos de volta, então, à tripulação da AXIOM-3. 11 horas e 16 minutos pelo horário de Brasília, então aí a escotilha aberta.
Protective tool there to ensure that the crew is safe when they egress the vehicle.
E agora vamos ver aí qual vai ser a ordem de saída de cada um.
In the last 3 weeks.
Então, ele está explicando aí os procedimentos aí que será
It's a great example of even in this moment, right? The hatch is opened, crew is ready to get out. We're still taking our time to make sure that they're okay, that everything
perguntando aí se está tudo ok aí com eles, se tem algum problema. Explicando então os procedimentos aí e como será feito então aí a saída e o ingresso então aí no barco de resgate.
And this again is a standard procedure. Even when they're getting up out of their seats, it's very important that they are very careful. They've been in space for quite a while. And so the crew there will also, help them if the crew needs help, make sure that they're healthy and safe as they're egressing through that side hatch.
Exactly. It can be, a little bit different when you've been in space for a few days.
Yeah,
experiencing microgravity. So exactly right. That type of assistance, if needed, is there and able to be provided as support.
Então aí as primeiras imagens aí agora da tripulação da AXIOM-3.
Of course, as they have been since launch day on January 18th.
De volta então aí à Terra.
Some great
Após
waves.
21 dias em
very excited faces there. That was awesome.
That was a wonderful shot. That was a wonderful shot.
Agora vamos ver então quem será o primeiro a deixar a Dragon Freedom.
Getting thumbs up there between ground crews and commander. Now, as we mentioned earlier, this is MLA's second trip on the AX on Crew Dragon for an AXIOM mission. So he's aware of this process and this procedure. I'm sure he's telling his crew, "Hey guys, we're going to take our time." And it looks like they are ready to proceed with egress.
Yes, you could see MLA removing his harness. Again, frequent flyer, as you've mentioned, our first frequent flyer on Dragon. Super exciting.
Maybe he'll get to put a sticker on the inside of the capsule.
Estamos aguardando então o momento aí da saída então do primeiro astronauta então aí da tripulação AX-3.
And you can see there that they've installed basically a protective tool around the hatch, the side hatch, as well as a little bit of a ramp there so that the crew can safely egress. They are still in their suits and also need to protect the suits themselves. So we will make sure that the suits do not get damaged as they're egressing. You'll see that the recovery crew there will help them exit, may put their hand over their helmet just to make sure that they don't bump their head. And there's a few people there to help them, which is great.
Right, and like we mentioned, this is their first moment back on Earth, and over in 23 days, gravity is going to be a familiar but reminder of an experience. And so, coming out of this hatch, you know, it's it may seem and look simple, but there are some nuances associated with it, with wearing that suit that you want to protect for, with also protecting for just your mobility coming back from this mission with its mission duration. You certainly want to be aware of their first time back in gravity in a while. So all of those translation aids really help ensure that when they're getting out of the vehicle, they're doing it as safely as possible, but also as comfortably as we can let them.
Quem está chegando agora, estamos acompanhando então a fase final aí
And as we mentioned,
do retorno.
The side
da
hatch is
tripulação
open,
da
but they're not
AXIOM
running out of their
AX-3.
seats, right? They're taking it is step by step.
Agora então com o
removing the
ingresso
harnesses.
dos
They did remove
astronautas
some
ao
of
barco de
the
resgate.
feet rests at the bottom of their seats.
Lembrando que o Splashdown aconteceu às 10 horas 30 minutos na costa da Flórida, no Oceano Atlântico. Lembrando que a nossa próxima missão tripulada, né, o lançamento será no dia 22 de fevereiro.
Right, because at the end of the day, with all of this, you want to make sure that you're comfortably getting out of the vehicle. And we saw there ground crews reminding crew, hey, just might want to close that visor just to be safe.
And to watch their head as they're getting out of their seat.
Exactly.
E aí temos o primeiro a sair.
And we see the pilot making his way out of his seat and about to egress the vehicle. So Villadei will be taking his
então, nosso primeiro astronauta a sair da Dragon Freedom é o piloto Villadei. E aí tá ele, o Villadei, o primeiro a deixar a Dragon Freedom.
Having some assistance from ground crews. Visor up.
Awesome.
And I do think I see a smile on that face. And a wave. A wave and a thumbs up. Walter is feeling good.
Welcome home, Villadei.
O nosso primeiro astronauta a deixar a Dragon Freedom foi o piloto Villadei. Vamos ver agora quem será o segundo.
If you're just now joining us, we are watching the
Estamos
live
aguardando aí
egress
quem
of
aí
the
vai deixar agora
AXIOM-3 crew,
a Dragon.
and you can see that
Estamos vendo então agora
Marcus
quem?
Wandt, our mission specialist, coming out
O
of
especialista da
C4, is
missão agora nesse momento.
getting ready to egress the Dragon Freedom capsule.
This will be Marcus's first
Nesse
steps
momento,
in
o
gravity
Marcus
in
Wandt
23 flight
deixa
days,
a
21
estação,
days in space, and
deixa a
18 days
Dragon
aboard the International
Marcus
Space
Wandt.
Station. So we're taking our time and making sure that he is comfortable.
Nosso
and making sure
especialista
that
da
he's
missão,
going to be
Marcus
safely
Wandt, então é o segundo
egressing the vehicle.
a deixar aí a Dragon
Welcome home,
Freedom.
Marcus. And again, visor up, and I think, of course, we're going to see Marcus smiling. Yeah, we are. Okay.
There we go, some waves.
He's giving his wave. Marcus is feeling good. This is excellent to see. Crew's going to assist as we take those first steps back in gravity.
Marcus Wandt, então é o segundo, nosso primeiro especialista da missão.
And
E agora
our
nosso
third
terceiro,
egress of the day, we have Alper
nosso
Gezeravcı,
especialista da missão,
the first Turkish astronaut
o
to fly to
nosso
space.
Alper Gezeravcı da
Alper
Turquia.
is looking good. He's excited. He's
Gezeravcı.
excited. He's ecstatic. He's happy to be home.
Gezeravcı.
He's giving an excellent
Então vai
smile.
deixar
A
aí
great fist bump
a
there. I
Dragon
love to see
Freedom
that.
da Turquia. E agora, por fim, o nosso comandante
And
Michael
last, but definitely not
López-Alegría,
least, our frequent flyer,
da Espanha.
Commander Michael López-Alegría.
E aí, então, nosso comandante Michael López-Alegría deixa
And even
nesse
with
momento
that frequent
a
flyer
Dragon Freedom
card,
após 21
MLA is no
dias
stranger to this
no
maneuver, but
espaço.
he is also taking his time, and he is
Então,
looking
todos aí
good.
bem-vindos novamente à Terra.
And welcome back, MLA. Excellent. It is wonderful to see all 4 crew members of AX3 egress comfortably and safely out of the Dragon Freedom that they've spent their time in for the last 2 days, certainly, but also just a number of
E
days
assim
on this
estamos
mission.
encerrando aqui a
But they're looking
nossa
good, they're looking
transmissão em
healthy, and
nosso
it was wonderful
canal
to see. So,
UPTV. Lembrando então aí que o Splashdown da Dragon Freedom ocorreu às 10h30 da manhã na costa da Flórida, nos Estados Unidos, e às 11h29, né, concluindo então aí a fase de resgate após 1 hora do Splashdown. Né, estamos então aí encerrando a nossa transmissão aqui no nosso canal. Desejo a todos um ótimo dia e nos vemos logo mais com a transmissão da missão Starlink. Lembrando de seguir o canal aí nas redes sociais e também, né, aí acompanhar todos os nossos vídeos e transmissões ao vivo. Então, obrigado pela audiência, pela paciência e nos vemos logo mais.